Hey listener, this is She Achieved Podcast with me, Albine Bennett. This podcast is about conversations with extraordinary women in Northeast Mississippi and beyond who had the courage to follow their inner calling. Despite the challenges they encountered, whether in business or community, they consistently and relentlessly pursued greatness. Success can take on many forms and looks differently depending on who you ask. But achieving success is something all of us can do. She Achieved is about inspiring you to chase your dreams and aspirations, just like the ladies I've been interviewing. These amazing women are sharing their stories so you can be empowered to achieve your greatness and become who you were created to be. I am so excited to be able to create a bigger impact for you and others, and I hope these stories of She Achieved will be as impactful to you as they are to me. Hey everybody, before we jump into today's podcast, I want to ask you sincerely to leave me a 5-star review. I am working extremely hard to deliver this podcast every 2 weeks. I want to have great guests and really serve you, and it's free. The only thing I ask is that if you're able to leave me a 5-star review on iTunes, I would be incredibly grateful. Thanks so much. Heather, welcome to the She Achieved podcast. I am so excited to have all of our listeners learn more about you, your business, and really your journey to where you are today. But before we jump into all the details and all the travel tips that you can give us today, let's give our listeners a little bit of a background on where you grew up, where you're from, how you ended up in our area, and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I'm actually from Guntown, and I live in the house where I grew up in a way because I live in my grandmother's home. So as much as I love to travel, I've never left home in a way too. My parents still live right across the street. And just like when I was a little girl, I've always loved traveling because I would go across the street to my grandmother's house and I would look at all of her photo albums. My grandmother was a huge traveler, which in Guntown, Mississippi in the 60s was very unusual. But since that's all I knew, it wasn't unusual for me. It's like I would look in her photo albums where she went to Morocco with my grandfather, Hawaii, the Bahamas, Niagara Falls, all over Europe, behind the Iron Curtain. Like she did a lot of traveling. So I knew that I was also going to be a traveler. And when I was in the 2nd grade, I went on my very first flight, and it was to Las Vegas.
Was it with your grandmother?
It was with my grandmother. I was going to be her travel companion. Her little sister lived next door to Siegfried and Roy, the famous magicians with the lions and tigers. And I would go to sleep listening to the tigers roaring next door. And eventually, they actually bought my great aunt and great uncle's home to turn into their tiger den. So it became their tigers clubhouse, I guess you could say. But I've also loved road trips too. So my father had seen a lot of the world when he was in Vietnam and traveled. And my mother did a lot of road trips with her family growing up. So it was a combination of that. Travel was always going to be a part of my life, and it was my hobby. So we would take road trips to, my father's from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So when I was in the 2nd grade, we would take a road trip through DC and Philadelphia and all the way up the East Coast. And my parents were really big on day trips because when I was in the 5th grade, my grandmother had a debilitating stroke. And so she could no longer travel. I could no longer be her travel companion. And my mother quit work to stay home with her full time so she would not have to go into any type of assisted living care. And so I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. But so if we were to do a day trip with our family, we knew we would have to get back by that evening because my grandmother didn't want to move in with us, didn't want anyone else moving in with her, but I always wanted to know that we were nearby. So 5 hours was a day trip. We went to Kentucky on a day trip once. And so there was no place that was too far for me. Like Chattanooga, I thought you only went on a day trip for the longest. But so when I was in the 3rd grade, I went to a book fair and I got a children's atlas and I started planning my trip around the world. And all of my friends would come to me then and ask me for tips. So they wanted to go too. And I would order every travel magazine that you could get. because they were free. You would just fill out a little subscription in a magazine, send it off, and I would have Alaska travel magazines coming in, and Rhode Island and Maine. And it was just, I was always going to do that. But I never thought it would be my profession. It was always going to be my hobby. I went to school for 7.5 years to teach college English. And I did that for 7.5 years. And now I've been a travel agent for 7.5 years. So it's really weird how that kind of all works out. But my first, and I thought only career, would be to teach college English. And I did that at ICC as an adjunct and at the University of Southern Mississippi as an adjunct. That's where I got my undergrad and graduate degrees in English literature. So while doing that, I took a summer abroad and spent it in England. And something about when you're young and you get to travel and you get to have these experiences, you then think, well, I can always do this, because you don't let yourself be talked out of these big things when you're young. You think you're invincible, you think you can do it. They had a poster in the Commons saying you could get 6 hours credit by going to England and studying about children's lit books. Like my favorite books growing up, Peter Pan, Winnie the Pooh, Chronicles of Narnia, The Hobbit, Harry Potter, all of Alice in Wonderland, and you got college credit for it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to do that for a summer. And so if there were ever an experience where I could travel, especially if I could combine it with education or with our church or with anything, I would take it. So my parents couldn't travel with me past the 5th grade. My grandmother could no longer travel with me, but they were very supportive, and any opportunity I had, they let me take it. So I got a lot of travel experience by the time I was 19 or 20 years old. And while I was teaching, anytime I had a break, my husband and I were traveling. And everyone always told us, well, get all your travels out of your system now, because once you have children, you'll no longer be able to do that. You'll be a homebody. And there's something about that that just fueled me to make me want to do it even more, and to prove to everyone you can travel with young children. And I would tell everyone, I've been flying since I was 8 years old. My children are going to be travelers too. And so I had London, and he was named after the first international city my husband and I traveled to, because we were engaged then, and he flew out, got his passport. Those were the days you could get a passport in 2 weeks. Those days are gone. But he got his passport in 2 weeks, flew out, and we spent a week together in London in my break that summer before we got married. And then once we got married, he thought, okay, you take a trip once, maybe twice a year, 3 times if you're really feeling wild. And I was like, monthly. I wanted to go somewhere. And this is on an adjunct salary. So we had to learn how to really stretch a dollar. My husband's an RN. He just got his master's. But that was back in the days when an adjunct does not make a lot. I did it because I loved it. And my goal was I was going to become a full-time professor. That was the goal. And I look back, and what I thought would have been a stumbling block then really just kept me available to go into the career that I was really meant to do, I feel like, for my lifetime. Because if I had a full-time position in a community college, which is what I thought I was going to do from the time I was elementary school, then there's no way I would have taken the chance to do travel, because I would have already had a career. And as it stood as an adjunct, I had more free time. And I had a friend who was a travel planner who specialized in Disney, and she had been doing it for a few months. We loved Disney. We took London to Disney a lot when he was young. And I grew up going to Disney. Logan had gone to Disney with his family. So it was a place that we loved to go. But we had never stayed at a Disney resort. I had never stayed at an all-inclusive in the Caribbean. And now those are 2 things that I really specialize in. But when she would talk about how, well, this is what she does, she plans trips for families. And I had always wanted to do that because I already did that. I just didn't think that there were travel agents still around, right? Like a lot of people still ask me, they're like, oh, I didn't know that's a career people still did. This is, not the 1980s or 90s. Like everybody has the internet. Why do you need a travel agent? Fortunately, the pandemic changed that mindset, because if ever there was a time to need a travel agent, it was then. And this is they're saying that we're going into the golden era now of travel professionals. 7.5 years ago, I knew one travel agent, and that was my friend. And I asked her, I said, is this something that you would mind if I talked to your boss about? Because I'm really interested, but I don't want to step on any toes. And I realized how it works. I'm like, I don't want you to think that I'm going to come in and try to take over. This is something I want to do on the side. And, I promise I'll be very respectful. And she's like, I think you would be great at it. I know you love to travel. I'll put in a good word for you. I was like, well, thank you. So I talked to her boss on the phone. My husband's very skeptical. He is the type A, like he is all about list and, data, risk analysis. And I am like, let's book a castle in Ireland. I found it for $5 for a hold. And he is the one that always questions those things. So it's good I have him because he helps keep me grounded. It's good he has me, or else he wouldn't ever go anywhere or do anything besides work. So we complement each other very well. But he thought, I think this is going to be a scam. Someone's just going to hire you after a little phone conversation, and they're not going to charge you anything. They're just going to take you on as an independent contractor. I'm like, that's right. And he's like, and you're signing a contract. I'm like, I am. He's like, and you've never met this person because she lives in Florida, which is known for scams. I was like, that's right. I want to do this. He's like, okay. And he had some reservations because we had a bad experience before where we had we wanted to do travel. And if something looks too good to be true, it oftentimes is. And the first attempt we had in travel looked really great, but it was not what it said it was going to be. So he was very skeptical, but I'm like, no, this is legit. I really want to do this. And I said, I can do it on the side. I have my summers off. I have holidays off. I'm just, just to give me something else, to do when I have free time. He's like, okay, because you always have lots of free time. I'm like, I know, I just want to try this. And my boss took a chance on me. I gave her a list of all my experiences because I didn't go to college for anything travel related. But the amount of times I've used my master's in English in my career, like it still has been very beneficial. I did a lot of travel writing also on the side. I've written for the Mississippi Visitor's Guide and a lot of magazines, DeSoto magazine, newspapers. I used to have a column in the Baldwin Gazette, the Guntown Saltillo Gazette, and Parents and Kids, Mississippi, Northeast Mississippi. So I've written a lot of travel articles. So this was something I was like, I want to do. I would love to pursue this and help other people travel because Mississippians are not known for being travelers. We're just not. A lot of my clients, it's their first time to get on an airplane. It's definitely a lot of their first time getting a passport. For many of them, some of my clients, it's their first time seeing the ocean, going to Disney. And so I have a lot of first time guests and I love that. But now I also have a lot of guests who are world travelers who could book their own trips on their own if they wanted to. But a lot of people don't know like the advantages of using a travel professional. Like, why would I do this if I could do it myself? And I have a lot of clients who are perfectly capable of doing it themselves, but it's time, very time consuming. And also it's something they're like, if it's going to be the same price, whether you book it or I book it myself, and I'm saving time and I have someone that's fighting for me if something goes wrong, it's like having free insurance. Why would you not take it? So I have clients that are all different levels of first trips to they've traveled more than I have. And so I was like, I want to do this. I want to try it. My husband was supportive, but very hesitant. And now, 7.5 years later, like I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't take that chance.
Oh, that was so much
Sorry,
to unpack,
it was
Heather.
a lot of information.
That
That's why I
was
stopped.
fabulous. No, I love it. I think there is so much that resonates with me, and I think will resonate with a lot of our listeners, because sometimes our strength and our passion is sometimes not what we pursue because we have these notions of whether it's just not this pie in the sky or it's just something that a mold that we're trying to fit in, right? Or just sometimes just brushing it off. Like, that's, who's going to pay for that? Or who can I help? Like, we expect that to be something that comes so natural to us, but not to others. And as I listen to you tell your story, like I'm immediately thinking, how could travel agents not exist? Because there are so many people who value their time more than their money. And yes, it does help that you specialize and you're going to fight for them and it's the same price. I think maybe that's the biggest selling point, carrots. But in reality, I could think of a lot of people who would pay extra just to have a fabulous trip, have everything orchestrated and organized for them, and go through the ropes. But anyway, let's back up a little bit to the actual decision point for you when you actually said, I'm going to pursue this. You touched on it, but were there a lot of elements, and was this like light bulb moment where you were just like, okay, I'm going to do this? Because you did say you were an adjunct, you were part-time, and that allowed you to have a lot of time. But what was there a pivotal moment where you actually had that realization where you're like, I'm going to reach out to my friend's boss? Like, was that the pivotal moment that kind of was the trajectory, or was there something that happened before actually did?
And I'm going to try to talk about it and not get emotional, but I will tell you what happened. So London was 3.5 years old, and Logan and I had a miscarriage very late. We were 12 and a half, 13 weeks. So it was very unexpected, and it had been a very healthy pregnancy. And I was just entering the second trimester, thinking that everything was now going to be okay, that I was going to be able to relax. And we instead had the floor ripped out underneath us. And so I remember sitting there just thinking, I'm like, what makes me happy? What makes me try to be able to keep going? Because I found myself just, I was getting depressed. And because I started thinking, like, well, when you start spiraling, like, what if this means I can never have another child? And, then London won't have a sibling. And then I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And I thought to myself, I need to plan a trip. And what makes me happy and what makes me like have something to look forward to, and it's always been travel. So whether I need to celebrate something, we believe in celebrating every birthday, every basically holiday. For anniversaries, Logan and I have always given each other trips. Like that's what we do for our anniversary. Every year of our marriage, we're married for 16 years, we've gone on a trip. And for Christmas, that's what we want to do. We would do a Christmas trip. For our birthdays, we would do a birthday trip. Like he spent his birthday, which he has an August birthday, and I have a December birthday. So my birthday becomes the birthday Christmas trip, and his was our summer trip. So we would go to Canada or Ireland or sometimes Branson, mountains or the beach. We would do all the different kinds of things, and that's how we'd celebrate, because Logan doesn't like parties. And so he was always on board then. I said, I could throw you a party or I could take you on a trip. And he said, let's go on a trip. So it was easy. It's an easy sell for that. So I was like, I need to plan a trip. Let's take London back to Disney. We had gone a year before when he was 2.5. But I was like, let's go again. That'll give me something to look forward to help distract me. And it was during that time that I was planning our own trip to Disney that my friend had become a Disney travel planner, or was planning trips for Disney for the past 2 months. And so we talked about it a lot, and I had questions because I thought, I'm like, I don't know if this is something that I could do. Like, will people actually let me professionally book their trips? I know people love to ask me for advice. I have to keep my phone on silent because I get messages and texts and emails 24/7. People love when asking me for advice. I was like, but is someone going to want to hand over the reins to me and say, book my trip? I didn't know. So we actually were coming back from Disney to make it in time for my friend's daughter's birthday party. So Disney was fresh on my mind. And it was really the first time that I had felt my heart lift in a couple of months. And so I thought, if this can help me, then there are other people that need something to look forward to, but also need to just not wait. I've known so many times where people wait to travel until retirement. Like that's kind of the thing. What are you going to do when you retire? I'm finally going to take that trip I've always wanted to. I'm going to travel. And then I started thinking, like, you can't wait to celebrate life. And I wanted to have these experiences when my child or my children were young. So I thought this is easily something I could do on the side. And then at that time, I thought I might book a trip or two a month, and maybe it'll help subsidize my own travel because I want to travel even more. And Logan was always trying to rein me in because I was always spending more on travel than he was comfortable with. Because I'm like, you can't take it with you. You might as well enjoy it now, have those experiences. But he's like, we also have bills to pay. So he kept the roof over our head, and I kept us having one fun activity, one thing to look forward to after another. So that was in January. And I was still teaching 2 and 3 days a week. And by April, I found out we were expecting our rainbow baby. And as an adjunct, you don't have any benefits. So the good thing was I didn't have any benefits. So I'm like, I can't just take a few weeks off. If I'm going to take off, I'm just going to have to not teach for a semester. And that's what I decided I was going to do. The following spring, Christian was born in November. I was like, I'm going to take the semester off. And then what I found myself doing then is I poured myself not only into my newborn and my 4.5-year-old and my husband, but the time that I would be awake, 2 hours in the middle of the night, no one else awake, with doing feedings and rocking Christian, I was also on my phone planning, booking trips. I booked trips at midnight or 2 in the morning because whenever I was up, sometimes people have different schedules. Now I've changed that. I now have more set hours, but at the time, I would book anything. And during that semester of teaching, where I wasn't teaching, where I was doing travel full time, I'd had a year where I gained a few clients. But what I noticed when I could do it full time instead of part time, having my one foot in teaching and one foot in travel, and I could be fully invested in travel, my business exploded. It did because that's all I did then. And I was like, I could do this from home. I could homeschool my children. I can do this from home. I always kind of was teased because I'm really good at social media. I grew up on Facebook. By the time we were at ICC and then Southern Miss ourselves, we were the first generation to be allowed to be on Facebook. So I had a lot of time mastering Facebook. Not as good on TikTok, but that's a different story. But I would get the social media award at MOPS year after year because I was on Facebook in the middle of the night. I would post things. But that also helped me with my travel business because I am very visible on social media. And so it just comes naturally to me. I like sharing information. So I have a teacher background and a travel background, and those two things go very well together because I don't believe in just planning a trip for people if they want to also be involved. So I have all elements of, or I would say levels. For some of my clients, they are literally, here's everything we want to do, you do it, tell me when to be there and what to do, and they want nothing else to do with it. And I have other clients that they are doing it along with me like a partnership. They want to be involved in every decision. They have questions daily, like they're very much a part of it. So I learned to customize to what my clients wanted. And at the time, then our company was growing, and I went from just doing Disney, because as I started, it was going to be Disney only, to then I picked up cruises because I had been an avid cruiser. I had been on multiple cruise lines. That was the next step. And then I had also been to Europe, and I was the only one of our agents at the time in our company, which is Whimsical Destinations. I haven't mentioned that yet, but I was the only agent who had been to Europe. And that was one of the reasons my boss gave me a chance because I had been on several cruises and I had been to Europe, and she said that they were looking to expand and wanted to book other types of travel. And so I was like, well, I want to book more Europe trips. So I started booking a lot of European trips. And after that, she told me, she's like, you know what? I think you should do some sandals and beaches training. I was like, that's not something I'm interested in. I've never been to an all-inclusive. This has been about, at this point, maybe 6 years ago. It's like, I've never been to an all-inclusive. And I really believe as a travel agent, what makes me so successful is I'm a traveling travel agent. Like, there are a lot of travel agents and everybody has their own method that works for them. But there are a lot of travel agents that because they're doing it part-time, they're more restricted of when they can travel or where they can travel to. But I want to have firsthand experience for my guest. And when I go somewhere, then I'll be able to say, okay, this was going to be great for this client, but this maybe it looks great online, because some things can look great online and then in person they're completely different. So I wanted to then have that experience myself. I'm like, if I'm going to even attempt this, I'm going to do the training and I'm going to have to go to some of these resorts because I'm not so sure about it. Like, we grew up seeing the Sandals commercials. I'm like, that's something that movie stars do. Mississippians don't go to Sandals on the weekend. And I'm getting ready to go to Sandals on the weekend. But I was like, that's not something you can do. But when I went to the trainings, I was like, okay, if these resorts are half as good as these trainings make them out to be, they're going to be fantastic. So my first year as a Sandals agent, I booked 4 trips to Sandals. I had 4 traveled Sandals trips. The next year, I took my family to beaches because I'm like, if I'm going to promote it and endorse it, put my name on it, then I'm going to believe in it. Like, I'm going to have experience and say, this is somewhere I would send my family. It's worth what they're saying. And if not, that's why I don't book anything and everything anymore. I've really pared down what I do focus on. And when I went, absolutely loved it. Thought it was fantastic. I was like, okay, now I've got to go to some of the Sandals resorts. So my husband and I started going. And he's like, where has this been all my life? Because my husband did not like the beach. He didn't. It's a lot of work for him, carrying all the wagons and the umbrellas, and it was hot. And then once you get all set up, then everyone's hungry. Then you have to pack it all up and leave again. He's like, this is not what I want. He was a mountain man. Like, he loves going to the mountains. But Sandals has changed him being able to enjoy the beach. So it's great. And I'm not a just sit on the beach and not do anything kind of person. So it's good for me because there's tons of things not only to do at the resort, but to explore on the island. And so, long story short, I'm now the top agent in the state for Sandals. I'm the first Sandals Royal Chairman Mississippi has ever had. And that's a combination of, like, once I decide I like something, or I go all in. But the other thing that happened is, Mississippi being not known for travel, we did not have any BDMs for Sandals that were designated for Mississippi. But then Sandals decided they were going to give us one. And Logan and I were at a wedding show. Sometimes we would drive down to the coast to do a wedding show because, fun fact, my husband is also a travel agent now because he didn't quite understand everything that was going on my end. And I thought to myself, if he does this with me, if we become partners and something we can do together, then not only will he understand on a smaller scale, even though this is not his full-time career, he's in the healthcare field. I was like, but then he'll be more encouraging for me to do it because he'll understand what it all entails. And then I'll be able to talk to him about it because he'll understand. So I kind of wanted to build my own partner, and that's what I did. And he loves travel, but he might do it on like a 1/50th of the scale that I do because it is not his full-time career. But because of that, then he was more engaged and would do travel shows with me, would go set up in local festivals or do bridal shows. And I didn't want to do those things by myself. I wanted him to go with me. And so then once he became a travel agent too with our company, we would do them together. And that's another thing that really helped our business pick up because we were a team. And while we were there, Sandals said, we're going to send our new BDM to join you so you can meet her. And at the time, like, she was from Louisiana. At the time, she was going to be moving to Jackson, Mississippi, which is still 3.5 hours from here. But she came and she helped us at our Sandals booth. And then she said, we want to do a Caribbean night with you. And I had heard of these Caribbean nights, but I thought, I don't think that's going to be something I'm going to be able to do. And that's where you invite your clients to come and find out about Sandals Resorts, and they get an incentive just for attending if they book. And she's like, I think we should do one. And we did. And it was really successful because then people got their questions answered that they were unsure of. And I could tell them about my personal experience from the resorts that I had been to. And then I had some clients that came that had already been, and they shared their experiences. So then we had started doing where we did them quarterly. And then from there, it just started snowballing. So within, like, now I've been a Sandals agent for 6 years, right at 6 years. And I absolutely love it. So it's not the only thing I do, but it has become one of the main things that I do. Just because I realized you have to really have a niche and narrow your scope. So mine has always been like celebration. So whether it's a milestone, whether that means it's a graduation or a 30th or 40th birthday trip, big anniversary, honeymoon, like I love celebrating. And so that's always been something that's important to me. And that's why I focus on Disney, Universal, cruises, all inclusives, things that the whole family can go to if they want, or if you want couples only, you can also do that.
So Heather, your journey is so interesting to me because I can see that in the past 7.5 years, it has tremendously evolved. It started out as a passion of yours, which continues to be that. Like, I do not see you stopping to travel. Like, even if this career fizzles out or you decide to do something else, like, I can truly tell that you are an explorer and you are a helper and you're a servant. You get so excited talking about all of the different ways that you can help others. I know for me personally, traveling is super stressful because being a mom and a career woman and a business owner, like there's all these things you have to like take care of. Some of my favorite trips have been those with a girlfriend who takes care of everything, and I literally show up with my ticket and bag and we're on our way, to where you don't have to think about a single thing. So I think what you do is so valuable and amazing. But there's a lot of things you mentioned that you make it sound so easy, but I know it wasn't. And you have had to really evolve. And one of the things that I think is really special about you is how you do utilize what you went to school for, so to speak, right? Because you have written articles and you have contributed in so many different ways, but you have also turned it into something that's a tool for you, which is your social media outlet, your Facebook group page. Let's talk a little bit about that and your journey to how you established it and how it has been helpful to your business, so that some of our listeners can take some of the tools, tips and tricks that you have done that maybe could translate into their businesses. But you have become super successful, and it has really, I believe, attributed to the success of your business because you are so willing to share. And because of all of that combined effort, I also want you to touch on your podcast and your radio show that you are now doing, that helps even more people, and that but has also helped you be more sustainable in your business. Let's touch on that, but let's start with the social media and the group page, and then into your radio show and your podcast and how that's working out to benefit you, but also others and your clients.
Well, to start with, I just posted information on my personal Facebook, like my personal Facebook page. And what I found is when you cap at 5,000 people, you can't add anymore if you just have a regular Facebook. And what was happening is clients and potential clients and then their family and friends, they were wanting to add me on Facebook so they could check me out to see, okay, because I have clients from Washington State to New York State, everywhere in between, coast to coast. And so not all 50 states, but I'm getting closer there. So primarily the South, but then people share with their friends and family who live all over. So it was getting to where I could not add all my clients on my personal Facebook page. And I love sharing pictures of traveling, and that's what really inspires people. Like, they want to see pictures and videos and now reels, and they want to see them for themselves, not just have a phone conversation or an email. Like, a picture can, say 1,000 words, and that's true. You show someone a picture of a sunset in the Caribbean, it's different than telling them it's beautiful, right? Like, that, all you have to do is just show the picture. And then I thought, I'm going to have a space for my clients, my travelers, to know where they can send people. And I'm not bombarding my own personal Facebook page constantly. I still post a lot of travel on there, but I'm like, I need to slow down a little bit because I'm in everyone's news feed a lot as it is. So I have a group, and it's Heather and Logan Tate, Whimsical Destinations, and we're almost at 9,000 members. We have been doing this now maybe for 4 years, because I think I started about 3 years in. I think I was an agent for about 3 years before I finally decided I'll just do a group and see what happens. And what happened then is it's a place where I can share tips, I can share promotions, our own travels, my clients who give me permission to share their pictures and reviews. And so it's a community. And I will have people that will say, they'll message me and they'll say, I've been following you for 2 years. And it takes them 2 years of seeing my content to they now feel comfortable because they feel like they know me. And I am pretty much an open book. And so people do feel like they get to know me that way, and they feel comfortable even if they're messaging me and they're calling me from Kentucky or Virginia or Arizona, Texas. I have a huge Texas group of clients now, like because they're all referring their friends and family, and so they feel comfortable because they know me through the Facebook group. So it is primarily for my clients, both past, present, and future. And it's a place where they can ask questions, or they can say, how can I contact you? Or, like, I'd like more information about this. And then I can reach out to them that way. So that's instead of like, I'm not in anyone's inboxes unless they have messaged or commented and asked me to message them so they can contact me. And I believe in sharing information with people so they know. And I love sharing like travel links there, stories that other people have written, and fun places in Mississippi or local places. I also share my own podcast and just other information. I'm a huge supporter in small businesses. I have a small business. And so then I believe we should support other small businesses. So if there is any way I can support another small business, I do so. And I also will use my Facebook group as a way to share that. So whether it's like I have, friends who make merchandise that you can take while you travel. No one goes to Disney anymore without a Disney t-shirt. Like, you just don't. Like, everyone's going to have the matching
That's
family
right. Yep.
t-shirts and ears, and you're going to have like all the apparel, the logos. You're going to want, luggage tags. And so if I have friends that make those things, and I have multiple friends that do, then I'll share that information so people know where to go, where to contact. There's so many things that are related to travel, and it can be anything from like maybe you want a spray tan before your trip, and I'm like, well, this is someone I've used. Or you want a manicure and pedicure, and you want it travel themed, whether it's Disney or tropical. So I like to use it as well to share local businesses information so other people can find out about it.
What advice would you give? So some listeners may listen to this and say, well, this is easy. This is traveling, so this or that. What advice would you give just across the board for businesses and the importance of collaboration?
So collaboration is so important because we each have our own strengths and we have gifts. And sometimes you just need to know that you're not alone, that you're not the only one struggling through something. But as networking, you think like, oh, networking, it's so easy. Is it really important? Like, can I not just post on my own? And do I really need to make these contacts? And you know the story because you're partially responsible for me having my own radio show because of networking. When you had the networking event at the Meadery at Queen's Reward, like, I went and I was so excited to learn from the other women. I never knew I would walk out that night with a radio show. And the way it worked out, like, I got to meet Melinda Marsalis there. And it went from, I was going to be a guest on her podcast on the radio show, The Shark. And then it went from, well, you could do like a mini series, to by the end of the evening, after a 20-minute conversation, she's like, you could just have your own travel radio show if you want. And I had been thinking and praying about that for a year when that happened. But I didn't take any other steps towards it except for that's something in the back of my mind. Like, I keep getting the same questions over and over from clients. Like, where can I go on a budget? Where can I go last minute? Where's some good ideas for Christmas trips? Like, what can I do for a senior trip for my high school or my college senior? Where should I go on a honeymoon if I don't have a passport? Like, I kept getting all these questions over and over again, and I found myself answering them. Now that I have a group with almost 9,000 people, I thought, I'm like, I need to say this somewhere so I don't keep saying the same things over and over again, because to them it's new information every time. But to me, I already sounded like a recording. So I thought I need a recording of me saying this. So when Melinda asked me, she's like, what are some topics? Like, I could name them off because I already knew some topics that I was saying over and over again. What is the travel triangle? Which I believe is Gatlinburg, the Florida Panhandle, and Disney. And that is where Northeast Mississippians love to travel. That's our travel triangle. And those places are wonderful. I love those places. Going to Gatlinburg this weekend. But there's so much more out there besides our travel triangle. And so many people get kind of stuck in a travel rut and they don't want to go anywhere else because they don't know where else to go. They just go where they went. And it's on repeat. And then what happens is sometimes we don't appreciate the places that we go over and over again. Like sometimes you have to leave home to appreciate home.
Yep.
And I feel like that's the same. Like I have never been somewhere that I did not learn something about myself, about the place, about people. Like travel opens so many doors and so many experiences. And so I think people need to have new experiences to keep broadening their education in that. So having the radio show then was as a result of a networking event. And then it should go without saying. We think that only one star can shine. In networking and supporting other women, that when you support another woman, it's not diminishing your own light, because one star doesn't shine brighter just because another star is also shining, or it's not dimmed because another star next to it is shining. We can collectively shine brighter together. And it's a give and take. Like there's things that I can learn from you and things that you can learn from me. And it doesn't take anything away from me to share that. And it doesn't take anything away from you to share what you have. Instead, it helps us to hone in on what our strengths are and to have some help on those areas that we're struggling a little bit.
Yeah. Heather, you touched on so many important aspects of sharing that. Your journey through social media and having your own podcast now. And again, you make it look so easy, but you've been doing this your entire life, but full time as a professional, 7.5 years. And really, to start at the beginning, we're responsible for our actions, right? There's only so much. I think when we're on our journey and our path, we're always going to be doing what we're meant to be. It's just how soon are we going to get there? And our actions and our decisions will determine that, right? And the beautiful story about you getting your radio show / podcast is it's something you were always meant to do, right? But because you chose and took an action and showed up somewhere, right? Sometimes it is serendipitous as being at the right place at the right time, right? And what do they say? Luck is where opportunity meets preparation. It's so easy to say that was luck, but really you were prepared for that moment, and because you were at the right place at the right time, it just expedited that process. I have no doubt that you would have figured it out and would have made it happen somehow, some way. But this was like an opportunity that you were already prepared for, that was presented to you, and you took action, you grabbed it, right? And now you have this amazing show and an amazing resource for you that not only helps you in your business, but you get to help your current clients, your future clients, and whoever else is interested, right? And that's what I love about that. But then also talking about collaboration with women and what you talked about, the shining light, it is so true. I think among women, we get this negative notion that, almost jealousy-like vibes, like she has something that I want. But a lot of times we see people accomplish their success, but it's really their success in a way that's packaged that works for them, right? Like sometimes what your strengths are not my strengths, so why would I covet that? And I think it comes from a place that we don't know who we are, and we're not focusing on our strengths and our attributes that we can contribute or give back. And so many times I feel like we get stuck in our heads, right? Like sometimes we just need to get out of our heads and really focus on others and helping others. I know for me, the most beautiful things have happened when I've helped others, or when I focused on others and I got out of my head and not really having the strings attached, like sometimes it's an expectation thing too. We move too quickly, or we think somebody should behave a certain way, or they should buy or not buy from you.
And then it doesn't become genuine.
It's not genuine.
When it loses that.
I
am a highly competitive person. Anyone that knows me knows I am. But I try to only be competitive with one person, and that's myself. So whatever goals I had one year, I am very goal oriented. I believe in writing things down. I have a bucket list. Like I think if you don't envision what you want, then you don't have a goal to work towards. So I'm very competitive against myself. But at the same time, I also think that people who are truly happy can be happy for others. Because if you're happy and content and know that you've done everything you possibly can, you're not going to be envious of someone else. You're going to be happy for them because that is what they have worked for. I had a friend once, and she was a good friend, and she always thought that I was lucky. And she would make comments about me being lucky, and sometimes it is felt like I've been lucky. But then I had another friend that pulled me aside, and she's like, "You're not lucky." She's like, "You show up and you do the work and you do so much behind the scenes that people don't know. And it looks like luck. It looks like being in the right place at the right time." But she's like, that's like exactly like what you said. She's like, it's years of your passion and your dedication and wanting the best for others. And those things align. And sometimes they align, it feels like very, very quickly. But I will say that there are a lot of things behind the scenes being a travel agent. Everyone thinks, so I have to say this, everyone thinks that I now travel a lot because I became a travel agent. I traveled a lot before I became a travel agent. And that is what has made me a successful travel professional. I didn't do it without any experience. I had a lifetime almost of experience. By the time I did not become an independent travel contractor until I was 32. But I had been traveling, like I said, my first flight when I was 8. And even then, I would write in my diary, I would make plans. So I've been planning it for years, even if I didn't think it was going to be my career, but it's something that I knew that I wanted to work towards. But I have people that call me all the time. I get asked a lot, like people wanting me to train them to become a travel professional. And my first question is always, why do you want to become a travel professional? Because you can love traveling and this not be the career for you, because it is different. Traveling for fun and planning someone else's adventures, they're not the same thing. And people sometimes think they are. They often think they come with a lot more perks than they do, because sometimes that's the way it looks. But I spend a lot of my own personal money and invest a lot of my own personal resources into traveling. And so when people sometimes will call me, they think, well, I want to travel, and that's why I want to become a travel professional. Like, that's not why you should become a travel professional. You need to have that experience first. So if you're coming to me and you don't have a passport, you've never been on a cruise, you've never been, where are you wanting to book trips for people? What are you going to be able to offer? Yes, there's trainings. You can do trainings online, but it's not the same as that personal experience. So 9 times out of 10, or even more than that, when someone messages me or calls me or asks, I start with that. Like, well, where have you been? What is your travel experience? What are you prepared, to do for that? It's not a free ride. Mm-hmm. And I know people that thought this was for them. This is what they wanted to do. And then 3 weeks later, they messaged me and they're like, this is hard. Mm-hmm. Like, it is really hard. Sometimes you get calls in the middle of the night because a flight got canceled. Or, during COVID, I worked for 3 solid months, harder than I've ever worked before, on the phone for 10 hours a day, trying to cancel trips or move trips and do all these different things. And as a travel professional, if you don't have clients traveling, you're not getting paid. So I was working for free for months. But I will say one thing a couple things came out of COVID, and I'll say this, that happened, because it was devastating, because there was a moment where we thought our career's over. No one's ever going to leave Mississippi again. Like, you think in those moments, but what ended up happening then, so many of my trips, instead of canceling, we tried to encourage to postpone for the next year. And then what ended up happening is 2020 would have been my best year to date as a travel professional. But then what happened instead is 2021 became my best year, because I almost combined 2 years in one. And that was the first year I became a Royal Chairman. Mississippi's never had one. And it was also the first year that I was voted as Mississippi Magazine's best honeymoon planner in the state. And so what happened then, like, I might not have ever had those 2 opportunities had I not gone through what I went through with COVID. After that year, I thought, okay, I just thought I wanted to be a travel professional before. It was a fire experience, like truly the kindling experience. It's going to make or break you. And a lot of people, it did. A lot of people thought, this is no longer the profession for me. It was very stressful. But then I thought, there's so many people that need help. And there are so many countries that rely on tourism. And I have a heart for the Caribbean. And for example, like St. Lucia, 60% of their income is tourism based. Jamaica, it may be 30% is tourism based. So whereas it impacted us, the effects of the pandemic on the Caribbean were way worse than it was for us here. So I thought that was my drive too, to help encourage tourism in the Caribbean. And so because of that, then it set me up for the next years to become my best years in travel after what was a devastating 2020.
Heather, I'm so glad that you shared that. So many people do think that being a travel agent or any other profession for that matter, anytime you're organizing event planning,
Right.
I have a lot of experience in that world. So many people think that things just appear overnight, right? That's been my experience with events. It looks so fabulous and wonderful, but what you don't see is the hours of planning, orchestrating, coordinating, communicating, right, with all these different elements and parts. And that's what I envision a travel agent too. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I think that's one of the hardest jobs, because to satisfy your clients and ensuring that they have a great time. And, can you tell us if you've ever had a client who was unhappy? Because you are so likable and easy. But I'm curious, have you ever had a client who was not happy, or maybe it didn't meet their expectations and you felt terrible and you took that burden of maybe feeling bad about it?
More often than I would like to admit. Okay. But I will tell you one reason why. A lot of it I've realized it says more about them than me. And that took a while, because I wanted everyone to have the most magical experience they've ever had every time. But people aren't that way. We all have different personalities, and there are some personalities that lean more positive, and there are some that lean more negative, maybe slightly critical. And we also are kind of in a culture now where
immediate gratification.
We do have that.
Unrealistic expectations.
The expectations, I have found the expectations since COVID, they have been really difficult to navigate. And there are so many things outside of my control. So what happens as the travel professional, you're the travel advisor, is you are sometimes their middle person. You are their event person. They could be upset because they just had a long flight and had a fuss with their spouse, or their children may be stressing them a little bit, but they don't want to vent to them. They're going to vent to you. And traveling is difficult. Flying is difficult. I tell all my clients, and one thing I'm working on is trying to help manage expectations. I tell all my clients, you cannot judge a place the first day you arrive. You woke up at 2:00 that morning to fight in a line at the airport, to go through TSA, to be patted down, to have your liquids only in 3-ounce bottles, to be hungry because you ate a granola bar and had a water. And by the time you get to where you're going, you've had a long bus ride, you're exhausted, you're hungry, and nothing's going to look great. But if you have a good night's sleep, or you get something to eat, then have a good night's sleep, you wake up in the morning, it's a whole new experience. So I tell everyone, do not judge a place, no matter where you go on your travel days. You're not your best you then. And I've had clients that forget that. I have to remind myself that sometimes so I can understand. There are days I've traveled all day and you go, and sometimes when you have big expectations, it can be really difficult. So I try to help my clients manage expectations. When I went to Disney for the first time, I had built it up so much, because I went when I was in the 2nd grade with my parents. I had built it up so much. So many of my friends, I felt like had already been. I literally thought I was going to fly down Main Street. I thought Tinkerbell was going to put wings on me, and I was going to have, gold dust, and everything was going to be magical. So I had built it up so much. There's no way it could have reached my expectations. My first trip to Disney, I was disappointed. My parents would probably be heartbroken to know that, but I had just built it up so much. The sky was the limit. I had seen all the movies. I'd read all the books. I thought the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse, you weren't just going to walk up and down the stairs. I thought you got to do the pulleys and you were going to ride on the ostriches and everything. So it did not reach my expectations because my expectations were so high. So that is one thing I've learned. You have to help your clients manage those expectations. And really, what they could do 10 years ago, they can't do now. And that's one of my biggest complaints. It's the bottom dollar, how much things cost now. I tell everyone, just like going to the grocery store is not the same experience that it was this time last year. It's the same. Airline tickets this year have gone out the roof, and everything has gone up. So with that being said, people are paying more, and they're comparing it to 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when they went on their honeymoon to Cabo 20 years ago, and it's not the same. Restaurants aren't the same either. Our level of service in the service industry since COVID, across the board, has taken a huge hit. And I think the morale of everyone took a huge hit, and it's building back, and it's taking time. And so managing expectations is part of that.
So Heather, what advice would you give someone who is, thinking about doing something different, whether it's pursuing a passion or starting a different career, maybe starting their own business, or maybe even transitioning their passion into a full-time business?
So I will say, you don't know unless you try. And I am one that if I get my mind set on something, then my mind won't quiet until I do it. And I would rather try something and fail than to have never tried it at all. That's the only way I think we truly fail. Because any other time, that's just going to be maybe a setback, or that's going to be a learning experience. Some of our failures, like I said, when I was an adjunct for 7.5 years, I interviewed twice for a full-time position, and both times I didn't get the full-time position. It was really disappointing at the time, but had I gotten those full-time positions, I might not have been willing to switch careers. So sometimes if you find yourself at a crossroads, it's the perfect time to try something that you've always loved. I don't mean like draw something, out of a hat, right? Like I think I don't mean draw something out of the hat, but if it's something that you feel passionately about, then you can do it, and you should try it. And maybe you don't go full time. Sometimes you have to ease into it. Sometimes you have to see, is there really interest in this idea? Is this something that I could do? Is this something I could make a living off of? Could I replace my other job, my other career? Or is this something that I'm going to do on the side because I love it, and it's subsidizing? It's allowing me to do other things that I really want to do, and I enjoy it. So it doesn't mean you have to go from one full-time career to another full-time career. I had a year transition where I did both, and it worked out then that after a year, basically, like I gave myself that time. Instead of I didn't quit teaching the day I signed up to be an independent travel contractor. I didn't. My husband really would have. I had a nervous breakdown if basically I'd have been throwing away 15 years. If I 7.5 years of college, and then at that point 6.5 of, so my math's not very good. I was an English major. Almost 15 years combined. 7.5 and 7.5 would have been. But I was like, I wanted baby steps. So there's nothing wrong with doing baby steps. But then there's a time when you also have to say, if you're going to be all in, you do have to sometimes let other things go. You can't do everything. And I'm learning that. That's why I wanted to be a jack of all trades when it came to travel. I was like, someone's like, I want to go to Branson. Someone's like, I want to go to Texas. I want to go to New York City. I want to go to Italy. For a while, I was an order taker. And now I've realized I can focus on the destinations I really know. And if there's another destination that I'm finding I'm getting a lot of interest in, I can pursue that too. But if it's one that I'm hearing once every 3 or 4 months, it's not going to be my area for specialty.
So what are your future goals and aspirations? What's next for Heather?
So I always, like I said, want to top what I did the year before. So right now I'm a Sandals Royal Chairman, and I have a few goals specifically for this year and the next year. I want to become an elite Royal Chairman, which Mississippi has never had, and I'm getting very close to that. I also specialize in destination weddings. I'm going to the Bahamas in a few weeks. I was invited to go, and I am a silver wedding moon planner. And so one of my goals is to move up to become a gold wedding moon planner. So I love doing destination weddings, retie the knots, which are vow renewals. Logan and I did a 15-year vow renewal in Turks and Caicos last year with the boys, and it was just an amazing experience. And so I love being able to do that. I want to win 3 years in a row as the best honeymoon planner in Mississippi. And like I would think, I'm like, okay, I won it 1 year, I can let it go. No, I love it because my clients make it so fun for me. Like they cheer me on. Logan is super supportive because I'll take all kinds of embarrassing pictures and videos of him to help remind people to vote. But it's fun, and I love being able to say that I am a hometown girl from Guntown, Mississippi. I work from home, oftentimes on my front porch where I grew up. I don't have a brick and mortar business that's been around for decades. I live in one of the smallest towns in the state, and I still can say that I am the top sandals agent in the state because I love what I do. And I think then that can encourage anyone. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter like if it's something that you went to school for. Like it doesn't have to be what your degree is in. You can change careers. And oftentimes we do change careers multiple times. And that doesn't mean that you failed in a career. It's a building block, right? The foundation that I received in teaching, a lot of my first clients were my students. I have planned weddings or honeymoons and family trips for my students that I taught The Great Gatsby to. Some were also colleagues. Some taught me when I was in grad school or undergrad. So all of those connections that you make along the way are going to be important for you. So there's no loss in whatever your previous career was, but you won't know unless you try. And so I think that if there's something that keeps you awake at night, that you think this is something I really want to do, I can offer this for someone else. I can help make the world a little bit brighter, because I believe everyone should have a passport. I think everyone needs a passport. I think it makes the best high school graduation present you could give or Christmas present you could give. But it's more than just travel. It's the memories that you're making. You're going to these amazing places, but you can connect in a way when you're not at home differently because you don't have the distractions and the responsibilities. And I tell my husband, he's so much more fun on vacation. That's why I have to travel with him so often, because there's so much at home. When you're at home, you're like, I've got to do the dishes. I have to do the laundry. I need to do this. I've got to fix this. And so many times we can be at home near each other and not spending quality time together. And when we go, whether it's a weekend trip to the mountains or we're going to another country, you're exploring somewhere for the first time, it's such an amazing experience because we're spending quality time together. We're problem solving together, making those core memories. Like we have ziplined together. Like we have gone swimming with dolphins together, hiked in rainforests, seen like one of the 7 wonders of the world, like had beignets in Paris and ridden carousels with London when he was 2 years old. Like we've had all of these experiences that I will never forget. And to me, that's worth, you can't put a price on it. And to be able to help people do that every day is why I feel like I'm living my passion that's turned into my profession.
I got my passport this year.
That is awesome.
And I can't wait to go on trips. But Heather, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I know you have really shared a lot of insight about your business and how others can succeed too. But then you've also really have encouraged and inspired me to do more traveling. I can't wait.
Thank you so much, Albin. It's been fun.
Fun.
It's talking to a friend is what we've done today. So I've enjoyed it.
Fabulous. Well, thank you. Appreciate you.